What is happening, everybody? Happy Sunday. James Hancock here, back to review the latest episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead, an episode called Twist and Shout. I'm a little bit hoarse and I'm half deaf today because last night I was over in Brooklyn for UFC 223. It was an absolute blast and it came at the end of a very crazy week for the UFC in terms of news, but in spite of my fatigue, I wasn't about to let a week go by where I don't cover the latest antics of Mr. Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell alluded to the fact that his character may not survive this season. However, I think that news was more of a tease with a bit of a twist as opposed to a revelation about the fate of the franchise, as will become abundantly clear as we get to the end of the recap of the episode. But for a season that's had its fair share of ups and downs, I have to say that I really did enjoy this episode. As producer Rob Tapert pointed out in the post-credit behind-the-scenes little featurette, this episode was a very clear homage to Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's Carrie. And according to Rob Tapert, back when they were in college, Sam Raimi dragged Rob Tapert to see Carrie in the theater, so I think this is an episode that had a lot of sentimental value for him. But in honor of Brian De Palma's absolutely masterful, historic, classic horror film, I decided to wear my Brian De Palma / Def Leppard t-shirt as a way of having like a double homage. But this is an episode called Twist and Shout, and from age 10 onward, after seeing Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I was an absolute fanatic for the Beatles, in particular Twist and Shout as performed by Matthew Broderick in that film. But if that is not enough for people, this episode just had a ton of stuff to enjoy. We actually got to see the birth of Evil Ash, something we've been anticipating for a while. And I have to say, Bruce Campbell, who's a pretty old guy at this point, looked pretty goddamn lean and mean coming out of that disgusting gelatinous sack that he hatched from. Bruce Campbell's going to be 60 in June, and if we can all aspire to look as lean as he does at 60, I think we'll all be okay. But as we quickly learn, this is all part of Ruby's demonic plan to unleash an evil Ash on a high school dance, wreaking all sorts of chaos and mayhem in order to try and turn Brandy against her father for good. In order to maintain the illusion that he actually is her father, Evil Ash immediately hacks off his weird, like, demonic chainsaw hand so that he can replace it with an actual mechanical one, which was a nice little callback to Evil Dead 2, where we saw Ash with a chainsaw hacking off his own hand after it turned against him. A scene that I still maintain is probably the high watermark creatively of the entire franchise. But I saw a couple websites. I don't think it was Bloody Disgusting. I think it was not Deadline. In any case, there were a few websites last week that were talking about how they thought that Kelly might be dead for good or permanently replaced by Kaya. But as we see in this episode, Pablo, through the rift that is down in the basement of the hardware store, is able to communicate with the ghost of Kelly on the other side. So I think the Kelly that we know and love will probably be making a triumphant return. I'm assuming in the next episode, given how this episode ended. But what makes this episode so fun is that the majority of it takes place at a high school, and it's an absolute splatterfest, absolute massacre. From my own childhood in the 1980s, there are few environments more appropriate for horror than a high school. Pick any major horror franchise or any major slasher flick from the 80s. Chances are at some point it's either going to feature high school students or scenes at a high school. And while initially the demonic Ash is just kind of picking people off one at a time, he finds a few kids smoking a joint, they kind of backsass them and throw it at him, and he hacks into pieces. But I have to say, for a TV show, the splatter and the gore and the blood and just the overall special effects, they held nothing back. I mean, perhaps the blood was a little pink, making it feel a little more fun and family friendly than some of those like dark, nasty kind of brownish purples that we see in some of the Evil Dead movies. But the episode unfolds like an elaborate game of cat and mouse as good Ash is trying to find bad Ash. Everyone assumes that our good Ash is responsible for all the mayhem that's unfolding, and they continue just to get in Ash's way as he tries to catch up with this guy who's just carving a path through the entire school. But there was one great cutaway that I loved as Ash is preparing for battle, where we see him shove his cup in before throwing a few things in the locker. And it's just a simple little detail, but it's those little details that make Ash who he is. But it's also just smart thinking. I'd say my only source of frustration with this episode is just seeing how the Ruby / Brandy has continued to drag on for as long as it has. I mean, here we are, 7 episodes deep, and I was just starting to get tired of Ruby constantly trying to turn Brandy against Ash. Meanwhile, while all this is unfolding, we have a few interesting scenes where Pablo takes on the evil Kelly / Kaya, I think is her true name. And he also has a brief encounter with the evil Ash. But back on the dance floor, we see the Ruby's final coup de grace to try to turn Brandy against her father permanently as she impales herself on his chainsaw. And Ruby picks up the Kandarian dagger and she's about to throw down with her own dad when Pablo and Evil Ash come hurtling onto the dance floor as well. And then it becomes abundantly clear that everything Ash has been saying has been true. And we get this great face-off between good Ash and Evil Ash. There's just a brief shining moment that I think might be the funniest moment all season so far, where Ash blasts the Evil Ash in the face with his shotgun. Half his head goes, but he just laughs. He goes, "Ha, you missed." And he's got this classic kind of Ash smirk. Even when you're talking about a demon Ash, he still has the Ash mannerisms. There's something about that moronic bravado, even in Evil Ash, that just makes me love this character very dearly. And Ruby's plan basically finally falls to pieces, especially when she stands up on the dance floor with all of her guts and entrails hanging out and starts stumbling around, ranting and raving. Obviously at this point, Brandy's gonna be on her dad's side for the rest of the show. However, Ruby spoils their little reunion by hurling the Kandarian dagger at Ash. Brandy steps in the way, takes it in the back, and the episode closes as her spirit basically goes into some sort of limbo or spirit world or world of the dead. We see that it is a world that's basically parallel to our own, but that is populated by these horrible, menacing spirits. My hope is that Kelly is there on the other side and that she and Kelly will have a nice little team up. But as we see in the post-credit teaser, Ash and Pablo team up to basically impale Ash on his own chainsaw, probably so he can go to the other side and try to rescue his daughter. So something tells me that that death of Ash is precisely the death that Bruce Campbell was alluding to in that interview he gave earlier. I think he's been a little annoyed or a little frustrated that this season has underperformed so much, and maybe that's a way of trying to drum up some interest in the show. In any case, they've got my money, they've got my attention. I hope some other people are enjoying the ride, because unless there's a sudden surge of interest in this character, the next 3 episodes are the final adventures of Ash Williams. But I hope all you guys are enjoying the show. In spite of its ups and downs, I'm definitely having fun with Season 3. Hope you enjoyed my recap and review. If you would consider subscribing to my channel, I would sincerely appreciate it. And in terms of videos that I have coming up, I'm definitely going to be tackling Legion Season 2, Episode 2 on Tuesday, and I'll be tackling the Season 3 premiere of The Expanse on Wednesday, so I'm really looking forward to that. But thank you so much for supporting my channel. I genuinely appreciate it, and I'll talk to y'all soon.